Greetings children. This is the fifth and final part of explanation of your lesson Going Places. It's for class 12 CBC students. The other 4 parts you can get the link from the description box. Let's get started with the last section. After dark, she walked by the canal along a sheltered path lighted only by the glare of the lamps from the wharf across the water, and the unceasing drone of the city was muffled and distant. One important life skill that we can learn from this story is the difference between subjective reality and objective reality. Here the protagonist, Sophie, reaches at a stage where she can't differentiate between what is the subjective reality and what is the objective reality. Her world of fantasy that begins to control her actions. And what is the real world outside she can't understand. Look at that. At dark, she walked by the canal along a sheltered path lighted only by the glare of the lamps from the wharf. Wharf is a dock, a river bank, from where a slight light comes across the water and the unceasing drone of the city. And at this park, you could hear the drone of the city. Drone here means the slight sound, the bustling sounds at a distance you can hear. And at a distance, it was a place she had often played in when she was a child. And this place was a familiar one for her. When she was a little child, she used to play here. There was a wooden bench beneath a solitary elm where lovers sometimes came. Yes, in this park you can see a lover's bench at an elm tree, a solitary elm tree. Solitary here means alone, and a single tree, and beneath that tree you can see a lover's bench there. She is sitting on the lover's bench. She sat down to wait. She was waiting there for Danny Kasse, her hero. It was the perfect place. She had always thought so. She waited there because she thought that it was the perfect place to meet for such a purpose. For meeting at this kind, for those who wished not to be observed. If wished not to be observed by anyone, this is the right place, she thought. She knew he would approve. And she considered the place as a suitable place for the meeting. And Danny Kasse, her hero, would agree with her for the selection of the place for the meeting. For some while, waiting, she imagined his coming. She was sitting there and waiting for him and his coming. And after some time, she started imagining that he was coming along the beach. She watched along the canal, seeing him come out of the shadows. She imagined that he was coming out of the shadows of that beach, that riverbank. Imagining her own consequent excitement, then she dreamt of the excitement that she showed before him, the surprise meeting. She excited, thinking all this, imagining all this, dreaming all this. Not until some time had elapsed. Thinking like that, and time elapsed, time passed away. Did she begin to balancing against this idea of his not coming? Then she could in this times begin to balancing against this idea of his not coming. He was not coming, and as time elapsed, she did begin to balancing. She started balancing the idea that he was not coming. So after waiting sometimes, she started balancing against the idea that he was not coming. Here I sit, she said to herself, wishing Danny would come. wishing he would come and sensing the time passing. She sat there, she dreamt of his coming, and time elapsed. Then she immediately sensing that time was passing. I feel the pangs of doubt stirring inside me. Then she realized that she had the pangs, the pain of doubt that stirring inside her, that coming inside her, that started coming inside her, that began to pain her. The reality, the subjective reality that started paining her. I watch for him, but still there is no sign of him. Yet she sat down there and watched for his coming. I remember Job saying he would never come. Then immediately she remembered her brother's words. He would never come. I wonder, what will I do? Then she started thinking what she will do now. What can I tell them if he doesn't come? Then she thinks about what she will tell her brother if he doesn't come, if he doesn't turn out, what she will tell her brother. That was her worry now. But we know how it was. We here means Sophie and Danica say. They know each other, how their relationship is. This is what her consolation. Look at the next one. But we know how it was, Danny and me. That is the main thing. Then she consoles herself that her relation with Danica say she knows and he knows. They know it very well. That's enough. She consoles herself. But how can you help what people choose to believe? If other people think in other way, how can they do it? How can they help it? That is her consolation. But all the same, it makes me despondent. At the same time, the thought makes her despondent. Despondent here means disheartened. That pained her. This knowing I will never be able to show them they are wrong to doubt me. That really left the doubt in those people, Job and the other members of her family. Look at the next paragraph. She waited, measuring in this way the changes taking place in her. She waited there, and she measured her changes appearing in her mind. Resignation was not a sudden thing. Resignation here means that leaving, the departure was not a sudden thing. Now I have become sad, she thought. And she realized that she was sad, and it is a hard burden to carry. And this sadness, she thought, was a very heavy weight for her to carry, a heavy burden, a heavy weight for her to carry, this sadness. Sitting here waiting and knowing he will not come, I can see the future and how I will have to live with this burden. So she was sitting there and waiting for him, and she realized that he wouldn't turn up, and that burden was something unbearable for her, she thought. That they of course will doubt me, as they always doubted me. No doubt her brother and her father and Jansi, the people around her circle, they would definitely doubt her, because they always would do the same. But I will have to hold up my head, remembering how it was. But she thought herself that she would hold up her head, remembering her relationship with Danica Sen. Already I envisaged the slow walk home. Then she began to envisage, foreseeing that her return home, her homecoming. Job disappointed face when I tell him he didn't come. Then she fascinates her meeting with Job once again after this lost meeting with Danica Sen. And he did not come, that Danny, and then he will fly out and slam the door. When she says this to her brother, he will will slam the door and go away. She imagines when she says this to her brother, he will slam the door and go away. But we know how it was. Look at the difficulty this girl facing. She can't differentiate between the subjective reality is there, the subjective reality and the objective reality. Again, she comes back to the thought that, but she knows how the relationship is with Danny Kase. I shall tell myself, Danny and me, it is a hard thing, this sadness. But she again thinks that it's a hard thing, it's a hard burden for her to bear this sadness. She climbed the crumbling steps to the street. After a long time waiting, she started going back to her home. She climbed the crumbling steps. Outside the pub, she passed her father's bicycle propped against the wall. When she reached in front of the pub, she felt a relief because she saw her father's bicycle that propped against the wall of the pub and was glad. Seeing this, she became glad. She became happy. He would not be there when she got home. The reason for her happiness was when she reached her home, her father would not be there to chide her. Excuse me, but aren't you Danny Kase? Coming through the arcade, she pictured him again outside Royce's. Once again, she imagined her meeting with Danny Kase when she reached in front of the Royce's window. He turns, reddening slightly. Yes, that's right. I watched you every week with my dad and my brothers. We think you are great. Oh, well, that's very nice. This conversation that she is meeting with Danny Kase, that she cooked up a story. That story, the incidents in the story that she rewinds now in her mind. I wonder, would you mind signing an autograph? His eyes are on the same level as your own. His nose is freckled and turns upward slightly. She then thinks about the minute details of his physical features with a freckled nose. Freckled means brown spots. Brown spots on the face and it turns upward slightly, his nose. And when he smiles, he does so shyly, exposing teeth with a gap between. So she imagines certain minute details that she can share with somebody else to make the meeting a realistic one, to make it a realistic description. She imagines all those minute details. His eyes are green, and when he looks straight at you, they seem to shimmer. Then she thinks about his eyes, the green eyes, and when his eyes looks at you, it shimmer. Shimmer means shine faintly. They seem gentle, almost afraid, like a gazelle's. So his eyes, she compares them with the eyes of the gazelles, the antelope, and you look away. You can't keep your eyes with his. You have to turn his eyes. You have to turn your eyes away from him. You let his eyes run over you a little, and then you come back to find them slightly breathless. Then you feel that you are breathless. She imagines of her meeting with Danny Kase. And he says, I don't seem to have a pen at all. Again, she imagines when she asks for an autograph, he says that he doesn't have a pen at all. You realize you haven't either. Then you realize yourself that you don't have pen or paper with yourself also. Sophie tells to herself, my brothers will be very sorry, you say. then you have to tell him that your brothers, Sophie's brothers, will be upset if they don't get an autograph. And afterwards, you wait there alone in the arcade for a long while, standing where he stood, remembering the soft melodious voice, the shimmer of green eyes, and no taller than you, no bolder than you, the prodigy, the innocent genius, the great Danicasse. These are all her imaginations. And she imagined of her conversation with Danicasse, and even after he went away, she waits there for some times, remembering all these things. So here, the writer tells us that her hero worship is part of her going places, the idea of going places. She wants to be successful and famous in her life. That's her imagination. But her practical world doesn't allow her to achieve it. So she sees this hero, Danicasse, as a source of taking her to that imaginative world. It is not simply a lover's relationship. It is her means to reach going places. So Danicasse is a means for her to reach going places, not simply a boyfriend. Her fascination of becoming famous, that she sees through this Danicasse. Come to the last paragraph. And she saw it all again last Saturday, saw him ghost past the lumbering defenders, heard the 50,000 catch their breath, and he hovered momentarily over the ball. And then the explosion of sound as he struck it crisply into the goal, the sudden thunderous eruption of exultant approbation. Then she saw once again the Saturday game. Then she saw once again when she and her family members went to watch the game. In the game, Danicasse, lumbering defenders, he goes past the lumbering defenders, the laborious defenders he overcame, then heard 50,000 they catch their breath as he hovered momentarily. Hovered means he floated in the air and took the ball, and then an explosion of sounds as he hit the ball into the nets. A sudden thunderous eruption of exultant approbation, she imagined, and went to her home. This is the story Going Places. So one thing is clear, that this hero worship is only a means for Sophie to fulfill her wish of going places. It's not just simply a romantic hero worship, but she wants to going places. And this is a medium. Danicasse is a medium for her to reach going places. So this character tells us a lot of things. What is the real world and what is the world of fantasy? We have to differentiate these two worlds. Otherwise, we will be in trouble, like Sophie. Look at Sophie's life. When she considers Danicasse as her lover, she can't differentiate between what is the reality there and what is not the real thing. And she herself says that this sadness is unbearable for her. So this lesson tells us an important lesson, an important life skill for all of us. We should be aware of the world of reality and the world of fantasy. What is subjective reality and what is objective reality? This is the end of this explanation series of Going Places. Thank you for watching the entire parts.